This webinar is organized by International Crisis Room 360 in partners with MAGTEC and Project Argus. Let me introduce our speakers for today. From International Crisis Room 360, we have Tony Luck, the Board of Advisor, who is our host today. From MAGTEC, we have Mitch Morissette, the Vice President. And lastly, from Project Argus, we have Joseph Wong, the Regional Technical Lead. Hi, Tony. Over to you now.
Janet, thank you very much for that warm introduction. And hey, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are calling in for this webinar. Listen, it's a pleasure for me to actually host this webinar today. In terms of speed, hey, you know what it's like. In my past life, I used to be a Metropolitan Police officer. I was actually an advanced driver for the Metropolitan Police. So I probably did about altogether about nearly 16 weeks training. About 4 of that is about high-speed driving, actually. Pretty exciting. So look, I've done all sorts of things like high-speed car chases, high-speed surveillance. So that's where we're literally following people and we have to do high-speed sort of maneuvers to catch up with people. So, and look, and throughout my whole career, I never had one single accident in terms of high-speed driving. So look, I'm excited about the webinar today, and I'm excited to have Mitch here. Mitch is pretty much an expert in that field as well. And also, look, we have Joseph Wong out in the vehicle today with a speed limiting device fitted, and he's actually going to show us some of the benefits of actually having an intelligent speed limiter device fitted. Okay, so I can't see any slides now. Who's going to help me out with some slides, please? Are they up? Oh, here they come. Thank you for that. Okay, so look, again, thank you to the sponsors today, Project Argus and MAGTEC. So if we go to the next slide, please. And actually, we've jumped past that one. Okay, so look, let's kick off with some of the problems that we have in the UK. And I've taken these figures. If we go to the next slide. So if you look at some of the UK statistics, and Mitch, what I'm going to do today is make sure that this is fully conversational. I don't want it just to be a presentation. This is educational as well. So these figures are actually from the UK government, and what's interesting is that although it's miles per hour, I've travelled around the whole world and I've seen speeding in every single country. So whether it's miles per hour, whether it's kilometers per hour, it's basically the same frame. Correct, Mitch?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me here today, Tony. Just a quick intro. I've been with MAGTEC for about 25 years. We've been developing vehicle control systems on the security side and also on the safety side. And as Tony mentioned, we've seen a lot of this ourselves. Speeding, miles per hour, kilometers per hour, it's the same thing. Ultimately, it's the force and the velocity of the vehicle. The faster you go, the more damage that's going to happen, the more likely it's going to happen. So, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, Mitch, look, later on, we'll be talking about some of the reasons, that happens, right? But when you look at some of these statistics here, you see, 13% on motorways or commonly known as highways. Is there, do you think there's a reason why people speed more on motorways than perhaps some of the side roads? Is there any logic behind that?
Well, absolutely. It feels like you should be able to go faster. I mean, and that's one of the efforts that I think a lot of the cities are trying to do now. And I know there's been an effort in Europe to change the road so that they feel like you can't go as fast. But when you're looking at most of the motorways and highways and freeways that we've got around the world, they're designed to go faster. You've got traffic merging on in the same direction, able to get up to speed. You don't have any cross traffic. There's no sidewalks or crosswalks or anything like that. So it feels like faster. So yeah, typically, there's everybody says they just want to keep up to the flow of traffic, but that just ends up mob mentality.
Yeah. If we can move to the next slide, because I've got some interesting statistics here. And interesting, look, you can see in the slides and this is government statistics, by the way. You can see where they put the speed limits in, and then you can see when you read these graphs, you can see going from left to right, you can see the overspeeding. And look, here is it's looking at the different car type, and then on the right hand side, we're looking at the van type. But I suppose the commonality here is that it doesn't matter if you're driving a car or if you're driving a bus or a HGV, because I think we go on to show the similar sort of figures, right? So, Mitch, in your sort of experience, 25 years in sort of looking at speed limiting devices and things of that nature, what are your sort of thoughts in relation to, because we can't just say it's all van drivers, right? Because everyone would like to go, oh, it's all the van drivers or it's all the heavy goods vehicles. When the statistics here show that actual motor vehicles cars with passengers in them are actually speeding as well.
Oh, absolutely they are. And, they do tend to do more of it. You've got commercial or heavy goods vehicles that are driving for a fleet. They've got more training. They're moving larger vehicles and have to be a lot more attentive. And there's a lot of rules in place to help ensure that they are. But of course, everybody's still going to speed to some extent. If there's nothing stopping you from doing it, a lot of drivers just tend to do it. And, yes, there's far more light duty vehicles and cars on the road. So just by nature, there's going to be that many more of them. And it doesn't feel like a lot more speed when you're dealing with a smaller vehicle than it does, an extra few kilometers an hour feels a lot more in a heavy goods vehicle than it does in a light duty car. Yeah,
sure. Can we go to the next slide? Because this is, pretty interesting for me. If you look at maybe vans, if you look at heavy goods vehicles here, and then we look at even buses, okay, these are the long buses. So, these are people who probably drive for their, for their employment as such. So, I suppose there are other consequences here. With articulated vehicles. So articulated HGV, heavy goods vehicle, is basically, those maybe a tractor and trailer in that sense, okay? And then if you look at the long buses, those are probably single decker buses, although the long versions, it's not just a short minibus as such. So there are probably more serious consequences to heavier vehicles speeding, correct?
Well, absolutely. Yes. If you look back at that, the slide we saw earlier, we had two buses that collided with one another and they did some extensive damage. It was back on slide 3. When you're dealing with vehicles that size, there's just that much more weight. It's that much harder to stop them. Reaction time and stopping distance really come into play. So the faster you're driving, the less time and space you have to react to those situations.
And going back to what I said earlier, Mitch, in my experience as someone driving extremely high speeds, sometimes with lights and sirens, but when you're on surveillance, sometimes with no lights and sirens. So obviously we're highly trained in that regard, but I suppose the ordinary motorist isn't trained to look for some of the things that I'm looking for, in anticipation. And of course, then this is where speed actually becomes a significant factor in any accident or event.
Definitely. The feedback that we've been getting from the industry, from fleets everywhere is the root cause of almost all issues that they experience start with speed. If you're speeding, like I said a minute ago, you've got less time and space to react. Your stopping distance is considerably increased. And, in such, when you are speeding, you're following distance of the vehicle in front. It's a lot easier to tailgate if you're speeding and driving too fast, which again is not allowing you that ability to react to what's going on around you. And so many drivers out there develop bad habits over the years because they become complacent. Not everybody's as vigilant as law enforcement with the training that they might have. Continuous training, when you've got individuals or, even young drivers, young drivers have had the more recent training, but they're also, young and invincible, and it's a different mindset. And then when you get people with a bit more experience, maybe they would just become complacent, and because they've gotten away with it so long and they haven't been in an accident in so many years, it's it's not an issue. If you got into an accident or you get a ticket every time you went out and you were speeding, you would never do it anymore.
Yeah.
But everybody got away with it for so long, and you just continue to push it.
Yeah, look, I've always been an advocate of, especially with the new young drivers. I mean, look, I can remember back to, when I was a police officer, going out to some of these accidents at night time where, young men had gone out in vehicles and, gone into bends much too fast and, unfortunately killed themselves. So I've always been an advocate that for new drivers, there should always be some form of speed limiting. But look, let's go to the next slide, because I want to sort of look at this particular study. And there are a number of studies out there, and some are done on the psychology of why people speed. And but look, this is a report commissioned by the Royal Automobile basically Association, right, the RAC in the UK. And look, the RAC is basically, it's a members association. And look, what they did is they conducted this survey. And look, there's actually some quite interesting responses here. So look, let's work from left to right. And Mitch, perhaps as we go through each of these, perhaps you could just give some commentary on what do you think? So, look, if we look at the first one, if we look at it's safe to go faster than the speed limit. There's nothing else on the road. Now, look, I know, in preparation for this webinar, right, we even spoke about this, okay? Because, there are sometimes stretches of road, you kind of ask yourself, why is the speed limit so low? But of course, as you explained to me, and if you don't mind repeating that, as you explained to me, there are a number of reasons around that.
Sure, there's absolutely a lot of factors. Speed limits are not just arbitrarily selected for a road. It's based on the road design, as we mentioned earlier. You've got traffic heading all in the same direction. A collision, with traffic or with vehicles all going in the same direction is going to provide less of a risk than obviously a head-on collision. That's far worse. When you're dealing with roads where there's nobody around, nothing else on the road, maybe it's late at night or very early in the morning, there's a lot of other things that could still happen. I mean, there's animals that could jump out onto the road, something that just you need to react to. Road conditions, just because there's nobody out there doesn't mean that you shouldn't still be adhering to the speed limit, but those occasions are so few and far between. Typically you are sharing the road with others, and probably 99% of the time when we're on the road, there's a lot of other vehicles, pedestrians, cyclists, you name it. It's not a very good excuse.
Yeah, and I suppose, Mitch, from a risk assessment point of view, where the government are doing their risk assessments on roads, if the road is in a remote area as well, it just means that any response is going to be longer. And of course, the higher the speed limit, and if there is an incident, obviously the consequences of that would be significantly higher, correct?
Right, absolutely.
Okay, now look, what's interesting is that you'll see that's a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. And look, those were actually introduced in the UK to actually go into residential areas or areas where there's children playing and things of that nature. And look at the answer there. We see speed limit is inappropriate. So I suppose this goes into the psychology studies. I mean, and I'm not a psychologist, okay, and I don't think you are either. But I think, yeah, I mean, we can just talk from our own experience of, you know, when these zones are set up, this is meant to be, you know, a safe zone, a safe speed zone to, you know, protect the residents living in that area. So what, you know, what's your thoughts on why some people actually feel that that's inappropriate?
Well, they're always in a hurry, I guess. That's probably the best answer, right? They're always in a hurry. They, you know, they feel selfishly that they need to get to where they're going is more important than anything else, especially when there's, you know, nothing else happening at that time. But like I said a minute ago, if you never get into an accident or you never get a speeding ticket, you're going to think you get away with it all the time. If you never have a child run out from between two vehicles in front of you, then why would you be expecting that? You know, but yet we're always taught you've got to watch for that, you know, and pay attention. That's why they slow these down in those lower speed zones, you know, in residential areas, because you could have that happen. Yeah, I've never, knock on wood, hit a pedestrian that's run out in front of me, let alone a child, but it doesn't mean I'm not still cautious and well aware that it could happen. So I drive accordingly and make sure that, I'm paying attention to that. So hopefully it never happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I like this one. I drive accordingly to the speed of the other road users. Now, what is this? Is this, well, everyone else is doing it, so I can do it?
Yeah, it's the classic mob mentality. I mean, just because everybody, or lemmings, right? Just because everybody's jumping off a cliff doesn't mean I'm going to do it as well. They're putting themselves at risk. And ultimately, I would rather see everybody else driving just a little bit faster than me, because that's going to ensure that I'm not following too close to somebody else. You maintain that extra space cushion in front of your vehicle to make sure you've got that time and space to react. So
Sure. And look, what about the next one? Look, as a police officer, although I just want to declare that I never ever gave anyone a speeding ticket, by the way, because that wasn't my area of expertise. I wasn't a traffic policeman as such. But look, on the occasions where I did catch people speeding, this excuse came up quite a bit. I didn't look at the speedometer enough.
Well, that's a classic case of needing ISA, intelligent speed assist. Having a technology to help step in to make sure that you don't. If your intent is not to speed, you just weren't paying attention. Well, shame on you. That's part of what we're trained when we learn to drive, is to constantly be checking that. So it's again another weak excuse.
Yeah, sure. And Joseph, I know that this is something that you mentioned as well. That there is a tendency for people not to look at the speedometer enough there, to focus on other issues. Is that your experience, Joseph?
Yes, it has been. Looking at the amount of road users we have on the road nowadays, there are many different forms of distractions that you get, and many a times you may enter different zones that have very minute changes in speed. You could be in a 60-kilometer zone going to a 40-kilometer zone, and many a times we would miss that, and in that case you start speeding in a zone which is meant to be only at 40, usually at school zones and stuff like that, and that's pretty common. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, and then look, did we take the last point? Feel pressure from other drivers behind. Now, look, again, as an advanced driver, I have encountered occasions where you have a fast car come up behind you, and I'm talking about when I'm driving in my private capacity, and my tendency is to obviously check the mirrors first, and just accelerate and basically indicate over to the left to let them pass. And then obviously reduce my speed back down to normal. But Mitch, what's your thoughts on this? Is this just an excuse to because look, there will be occasions where you have someone that's coming up behind you, etc. So what's your sort of thoughts and experience on this?
We've done a lot of implementations and rollouts with our ISA technology, and that is one of the key points that comes up in every single one of our driver training sessions that we do. They always say, it's not safe to drive slower, drive the speed limit, because you've got people that are going to come up behind you and run into you from behind. Well, I've never heard of that happening when you're driving the speed limit. Ultimately, you're responsible for what's in front of you. And that's it. And the person behind you is responsible for what's in front of them. And if they come up behind you and they want to go faster, what they need to do is move around. There's a whole other debate on this one too about driving too slow in the fast lane. I know here in North America, it's we're supposed to stay in the right lane. It's backwards, I think, where you're from, Tony.
But, no, it's the right way, actually.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to say fast lane versus slow lane. If you're driving the speed limit, stay in the slower lane where you're supposed to be, and then you're not going to upset anybody that's wanting to drive around you and being risky. Then at least you're not in their way, and you just let them do their thing.
Okay, so Mitch, what I wanted to sort of talk about next is really the impacts of speeding. So can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, Mitch, can you walk us through this sort of scenario?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I mentioned earlier, we, speed limits, they're set based on the design of the road. And there's so many, points that come into play here. When you look at the one infographic there on the, on the left-hand side of the screen, the tunnel vision that happens if you're driving in a residential area at 25 kilometers per hour. You can see a lot more around you and take in a lot more of the hazards or risks that could jump out in front of you. When you double that speed to 50 kilometers an hour, which is only 30 miles per hour, it's a lot more difficult to really pay attention to everything around you. You're more focused further down the road, just naturally. So that tunnel vision comes in, so you can't really see everything that could happen, which is why, residential areas should be much slower so that you're not, you can react if somebody jumps out and, a child jumps out from between the cars. Because if you go to the top right, it shows the reaction time and the braking distance at the different speeds. And if you look at 30 kilometers per hour, you can react as a driver and you have time to stop before you hit that pedestrian that comes out in front. But if you go up just to 50 kilometers an hour, your reaction time, you travel a little bit further, and then it takes a lot further for the vehicle to actually stop. And in this case here, they would have made contact with that pedestrian. And then at 65, obviously it's even a higher velocity that they made contact with that pedestrian. And when you come down to the lower infographic there, you can see the survivability in blue. Obviously at the lower speed, survivability becomes much higher and the risk of a fatality does drop considerably. But even just going up a little bit, 65 kilometers per hour is the likelihood of a fatality due to a collision goes up, to 80% of the time. They're more likely to.
And Mitch, look, it's also fair to say, right? If we're looking at speeding here, obviously at 50 and 60, 65, the likelihood of that person surviving it goes down dramatically. But the other thing is that even if they do slam the brakes on, then we bring in, all of the other factors, okay? The condition of the vehicle, the condition of the tires, any cambers in the road, cambers, like where you've got curves on the road, things of that nature. And of course, then that's where the accident can actually end up in, rather than just skidding in a straight line, this is where you can end up flipping vehicles and things of this nature.
Yeah, vehicle maintenance is obviously a key part. You got to make sure your vehicle's in good operating condition and what have you. It's I think also the trying to swerve, if that's the case. If you're in the middle of a braking event and you're trying to swerve, that could also cause a lot of other challenges. But having a properly maintained vehicle and obviously driving within the parameters that those roads were designed for will give you a far greater chance of avoiding the situation altogether.
Yeah. Okay. So, Mitch, let's go to the next slide, because I'd like to understand a little bit more about the intelligent speed assist. To be honest, I don't think many people are actually that aware of this, and that's why when the team were looking at the next sort of webinar to do in terms of our educational webinars. You know, this is one thing that we actually thought there needs to be more knowledge of this, because I think some of the issues out there is that people think that by putting a upper limit speed limiter solves the problem, and it clearly doesn't. So can you just walk us through this and explain, you know, what ISA is, and then really how does it impact driving?
Absolutely. So speed limiters have been around for a long time. I mean, they're governors. They've been, you know, you've been able to set top end limits on a lot of vehicles, especially commercial, you know, or heavy goods vehicles. You can usually program the ECM for a single speed, or in some cases you can retrofit single speed limit devices. But the problem with all of those is that you have to select one speed that's not too fast for the slow roads, but not too slow for the fast roads. And there really is no good balance. I mean, you can't pick one speed that works everywhere. It, you know, ultimately the best speed to limit a vehicle to is whatever that road's designed to, whatever that speed limit is. So what ISA is it's an intelligent speed management system that allows, that can dynamically update to whatever the speed limit is on whichever road you're driving on. And if that speed limit is, you know, if you're driving on one road that's 100 kilometers an hour, you can drive, or 60 miles an hour, you can drive at that speed. But the minute you turn off that road onto another road that's 50 kilometers an hour or 30 miles per hour, it'll automatically adjust to that. And that is the best type of speed management system that you can get in order to manage that, because it's going to automatically update to the road that you're currently on. Because doing 60 miles an hour or 60 kilometers an hour in a 30 kilometer an hour zone, 50 mile an hour, you know, it's just not, you know, it's not safe. So picking that one speed doesn't really help everywhere. It only helps you on that one top, you know, that one high end road, but then our high speed road. But then at the same time, it could be keeping you a little lower than what the speed limit might be if they've selected something that's too low. So an ISA system should also give you the ability to configure different thresholds. So being able to say, you know, you might have some drivers that are very good that don't necessarily need to be governed right at the speed limit. So having configurable thresholds allows you to set them for maybe, you know, a couple of kilometers an hour or miles per hour above whatever the speed limit is. So speed limit plus a couple, you know, or a few. That gives the drivers the ability to manage their own speed while still mitigating the risk for causing a backstop to unnecessary risk for that vehicle, just prevent them from speeding.
Got it. And Joseph, you know, as a end user of the product, okay, you know, your experience, how has it helped your sort of driving?
I tend to keep to the speed limit most of the time. But what it helps is it takes away it gives me more space to concentrate on the safety of the vehicle, because now the speed is controlled to the maximum speed, posted speed limit in any location. It really helps take away a lot of stress. I start to have built back my basics etiquette in driving. I'm now constantly being able to keep my 2 second distance or 2 second rule from the vehicle in front of me. One of the more important things is we miss a lot of time. We will miss the change in posted speed limit, especially in minor roads. With this device, I don't really have to constantly be super aware of the change in posted speed limit. But I could just know that I have a stop that tells me that this is a 50 zone, and I'll stay within that 50 kilometer speed limit, and I can concentrate on other safety aspects while driving. It's not in initial stages of using it, I was a bit apprehensive and thinking that I would have a dramatic change in the way that I would manage my vehicle, but it doesn't. It actually very quickly integrates into the style of things that I'm doing, and then keeping things easy to keep track of. Yeah.
Yeah, so you raise a really good point there, right? Because hey, look, people jump into cars, they're busy, there's a lot of distraction out there. So, that was a good point you raised, that where you go from one speed limit to another speed limit, you're automatically, the vehicle's automatically going to adjust. So look, let me just explain then. So, and Joseph, correct me if I'm wrong. So within Singapore, the posted or prescribed government speed limit for that road is actually on the vehicle, meaning that once that vehicle is in a 70, you can only travel at 70. But if you go into a 50 zone, it will slow down to 50. Or if you go to Sentosa, that will drop down to 20. Is that correct?
Yep, that's right. It's dynamically controlling my maximum speed allowable on a given stretch of road. It immediately changes and updates itself and reference against the database that we have in the backend and allowing us to be able to pick up the correct posted speed limit at all times. Yeah.
So I suppose the vulnerability then of the normal speed limiter, the upper speed limiter, is that it's only going to cap me at that whatever limit that is, whether it's 50, 60, 70. But what that still allows me to do is to drive on the side road at that speed. If I'm in a 30 zone, I can still drive at 70.
Exactly. So imagine exiting a expressway or highway, which is say 100 kilometers an hour, and many a times drivers would maintain that speed as long as they could, and then exiting in a minor road, and these guys are still barreling down at 80, 90 kilometers an hour. It is something that is difficult to control, but with the ISA device, it immediately helps you to the moment you turn off a expressway, it immediately takes you down to the prescribed speed limit, and sort of a forewarning to tell you that, hey, you got to slow down. This is an area where you're not allowed to go at that higher speed. Yeah.
Okay, and Mitch, the speed limits for Singapore, the posted or prescribed speed limits for Singapore, they are already loaded inside your software. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got the database that we use covers most speed limits in most countries globally. So works very effectively in Singapore, outside of Singapore, throughout North America, Europe, UK, everywhere. It's got access to all of those databases.
Okay, so look, let's go to the next slide, because this is one of my actual favorite slides, and I'm sure the audience are going to like it. So Mitch, can you walk us through this slide, please?
Yeah, so what we do is because the speed limit information is actually sent to the vehicle so that it can enforce that speed, we're actually tracking the vehicle speed second by second. So what we've done with fleets that want to try the system is we can install it and we can run a baseline. So for the first couple of weeks, we will run it in a passive mode where it's not actively limiting, but it's still tracking all of the speeding events second by second and then reporting that information back. So you can see on the left side here, the profile that was created by this particular group of vehicles shows a very high speeding percentages. These are daily percentages of the time spent speeding. And then after that 2-week period, when we captured that data, we turned it on. We enabled the safe speed active limiting, and it instantly curbed all of that speeding. So you're going to see a little bit of spikes there in the active phase, but that's because, if you come in too fast to a lower speed zone, you're going to, it'll take a moment for the system to slow you down to that next speed. So that next speed zone. So ultimately, we're still picking up, seconds here and seconds there as the system's doing that. So you're going to see a few spikes, but ultimately, the two profiles from the left side to the right side are drastically different and instant. So it really reduces the need for coaching.
And Mitch, look, I think everyone watching this would agree, right? This is like amazing data, okay? Look, if I was an insurance company, I would be looking at that thinking, hey, not only has this, reduced my risk significantly, it's also reduced the consequences of an accident. meaning that, because we would have a lower impact, the probable consequences of that accident are going to be much lower.
Absolutely. I mean, again, more time and space. I mean, that's ultimately what every driver needs in order to properly react to avoid an accident altogether.
And sure, and look, let me put my supply chain head on for one moment. If you look at ESG, although this is not a fuel saving device, automatically there must be a fuel saving.
Absolutely. I mean, it uses more fuel to go faster. So driving slower is going to use less fuel. It's also going to improve maintenance costs on vehicles. Tires don't wear out as fast. Brakes, hard braking events are reduced significantly if you're not tailgating and following too close to the vehicle in front. You don't have those hard brake events. So, what we found is the fleets that we're working with are reporting back saying that, they're spending far less money on maintenance for these vehicles because the brakes are lasting that much longer. Tires are lasting so much longer, and just fuel usage itself, especially with today's high cost for fuel. It's a really good savings.
Sure. So look, any questions and answer, please put those in the chat. Let's go to the next slide, and then I want to go live over to Joseph, and Joseph's going to show us a quick live demonstration. If we go to the next slide, please. Mitch, look, I think we covered most of these here, if that's okay. And then because what I'd like to do is to really talk about your amazing case that you got with New York City Council. We can go to the next slide. Now, this is just amazing, the success that's come out of this this pilot and now implementation. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. So New York City they've been a Vision Zero city now for a number of years with several initiatives to help reduce accidents within the city, make it a much safer city. So what they've done, they've taken the initiative, and on their city vehicles, they did they did a pilot and equipped 50 of their city vehicles, ranging from small EVs all the way up to their medium duty sanitation trucks and everything in between. So they did this middle of last year, and the results are incredible, but not surprising. The total kilometers driven have exceeded 250,000 kilometers, and they've seen a 99.2 improvement in their speed compliance, which, also added to a reduction of 37% reduction in their hard braking events. So overall, it's been a huge success. They are very thrilled with the how well SafeSpeed has worked in their fleet, and they're already expanding the number of vehicles that they're equipping, and they're with plans to just continue to do as many as possible.
No, I mean, it's amazing. I've seen some of the the social media and some of the press articles, even the press going out in these vehicles and watching what's happening. There's been some amazing coverage on it. So look, we have got some questions coming, which is great. I'll ask them in a sec. So if we can go to our next slide, and then let's go live, or we'll leave the next slide till the end. Let's go live to Joseph. And hey, Joseph, you're going to walk us through what you're going to do today?
Yeah. I'm trying to get around now. Give me a minute. Let me get set up. We just want to be safe so that we can turn around safely.
So just for everyone, Joseph's not driving the vehicle. He's actually been the operator today. We have a handsome guy driving the vehicle. Is that right, Joseph?
Yes, we have. Yes, we have. I'm gonna show you. We're going a little bit. Sorry, just gotta switch the camera around. Yeah. Okay. We are now in a minor road, heading towards the merging into a main road, and we'll head up to a highway, and then we will show you that dynamically we are able to the speed will be regulated to the posted speed limit. One of the things that we really enjoy, oh, you have another camera there? It's really easy to install. This system is non-intrusive. I think one of the few key points that we have is we have installed it on EVs as well as heavy-duty vehicles and many different sorts of vehicles in the past, and it's something that it's non-intrusive, and it's easily programmable to fit the different types of vehicles that's available in the market. As we wait for a traffic light, so sorry, we're waiting for a traffic light so that we are able to get out of this junction as we try to get into the other, merge into the other roads. Am I right, Mitch? Well, with EVs are a challenge before, and then with this, our technology, with your technology, fitting on different types of vehicle has become so straightforward and easy to do.
Absolutely, yeah. We've designed this latest generation of the solution to make sure it's compatible with as many different vehicle types as possible, and it works extremely well on the EVs. So that kind of control and expandability has just been very good. Like I think almost half of the equipped vehicles in New York City are on EVs as well.
Right. Okay. I'm gonna be a little bit cheeky and get my handsome driver to push it a little to see if okay. That's a 60 zone. You can see that it's now flooring the throttle, and we are now being kept at our posted speed limit of 60 kilometers an hour. It's non-intrusive in the sense that you don't get a massive power cut when the system intervenes to keep it into the correct posted speed limit. It's fairly gentle. It doesn't make the driving experience jarring or how should I put it? Not non-abrasive. It's actually quite gentle. The takeaway of that the moment the takeaway of the throttle happens, it's actually fairly gentle, and it's not non-intrusive. Okay, so we are still in a 60 zone. We've got a traffic light junction ahead. In the next couple of probably a minute or so, we should merge onto the expressway.
Okay, so I'm pretty impressed though. So we've got the live video, we've got the live map, and so you've done a great job putting this together, Joseph.
Thank you, sir. The team is working very hard to get this together, which is good. We're having quite a bit of fun. Okay, it's pushing it now. We're at 40. Yep, that's it. That's a cut.
All right, so that's a good illustration, right, of where it does actually stop people speeding, correct?
It does. It's really effective, and what we really like about it is it's not refreshing every 1 minute or 2 minutes. It's actually live, meaning you say that every 10 seconds. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mitch. Every 10 seconds, we are taking fresh data from the backend server to tell the device on board that what is the actual posted speed limit that we're currently on. They have also designed the moment you change direction for more than 90 degrees, it does a fresh pool of that data to make sure that you have the most current posted speed limit in the device itself. Am I right, Mitch?
Yes, with one correction, it's not 90 degrees, it's 45 degrees. So
right.
with 45 degrees, we do request an updated check on the speed, just because the likelihood of turning onto a road with a different speed limit is very likely. So we're going to do that on a heading change as well. And you are correct. Every 10 seconds while driving is requesting an update.
And the best part is there's no way to experience this, but if you're in Singapore, you're most welcome to give us a call and we'll take you out for a ride, or we'll give you a chance to experience this technology that we have. It's nothing beats trying it out live yourself. I think that's something that is it's a refreshing experience, having an ability to not worry about your speed as you travel. West highway. still 60 zone here. So you can see that plenty of heavy vehicles that are speeding in front of us.
Yeah, that's ironic, isn't it? You're in a vehicle with the like speed assisted technology, and then you have heavy goods vehicles overtaking you. So
yeah, it is daunting sometimes knowing that it's a lot of the road users are not adhering to certain speed limits when it's a necessity, you know.
yeah. So Mitch, look, one of the questions that just came in was how long did it take to implement the fleet in New York City? How long was that implementation?
Well, install per vehicle is usually only about an hour to an hour and a half per vehicle. So you can accomplish several of them in a day, and depending on how many installers you have at it. New York City, we did 50 vehicles in less than a week.
Right. And then in terms of the driver training, I'm assuming that's pretty standard, correct?
Yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory. When the driver's trying to drive it, the system's just automatically going to do its thing. You know, it's not going to, it's going to limit them. You know, we've had some, you know, when we have an opportunity to spend time with the drivers to explain to them what the system is and why it's doing what it does, we get far better driver acceptance from that standpoint. You know, we have had some occasions where there's been a driver that missed the driver training and then went out and they called to complain that their vehicle wasn't working properly because it would just cut out at a certain speed. So the response that the dispatchers would always say is, why are you trying to speed? So anyway, it's
right. Sorry to jump in. We've just merged on the highway. I'm in a commercial vehicle in Singapore. It's legally limited to 70 kilometers an hour here. If you can see from the video and the speedometer video that we have, you see that we are currently limited to 70. Previously, while we are approaching the byway of entering the highway zone, which were limited to 50, and now we are limited to 70 kilometers an hour. Sorry, Mitch, sorry for...
No, don't apologize. It's all good.
No, it's good to see. It's good to see, and I appreciate James is obviously pushing there as hard as possible. Just to let you know, James is also a former police officer. So look, that's great. So Mitch, look, the other question that came in while we're waiting for Joseph to get into that zone, and Joseph, feel free to interrupt us. Going back, one of the questions that came in was in relation to the insurance. So, you know, did the users actually receive any insurance discount?
Well, I mean, that's gonna be different from country to country. I would expect with different regulations. From what we found with some of our customers, you know, you're never going to get an insurance company that can step up and say, you know, yes, we'll give you X% discount. But what we have found is that once implemented, once they can prove that they've had 0 infractions for a period of time, it reflects very well with the insurance company. So, you know, it gets, you know, with commercial fleets in North America, they get underwritten based on their performance, not necessarily, you know, based on what their intentions are. So you've got to prove it first, and then the insurance companies have, we've heard that some fleets have received some favorable renewals.
Yeah, and look, and I was going to say, because you know, generally, you know, within the supply chain, they're very reluctant to give discounts. But I know of companies, including, you know, one of my former companies, where we actually managed to mitigate the increase, right? So which was a cost avoidance. So rather than having the annual increase, because we put so many processes in place, we actually didn't get an increase. So obviously management were happy with that. So Joseph, how are we getting on? Where are you now coming up towards this zone?
I am trying to get off the highway now onto an exit, which is about another 800 meters away, to once again show you that once we turn off the turnstile, that will reduce us down to, I think, 50 or 60 kilometers an hour. In approximately another 30 seconds, we should reach that exit point.
Okay. One of the two I'd like to add, Joseph mentioned that the commercial goods vehicles are limited to 70. We also have the ability to go in over the air and change these configurable values. So you can set top end speed limit to whatever it is that it needs to be. If the rules for that class of vehicle is 70, you can set it for that. If it's if it's a different class of vehicle that maybe it doesn't need to be restricted like that, you can go in and change it if you ever wanted to. So maybe it depends on the driver. If the driver that you have is maybe a little more, if you get different drivers that operate that vehicle, you could go in and change some of these settings and give your better drivers a little bit more room versus your some of your drivers that are maybe a higher risk driver. You could maybe set them a little lower at their top speed while offering less of a threshold as well.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Right, making it adjustable and flexible. Because if you're carrying, I'm assuming if you're carrying, dangerous loads or things of that nature, you can always take it down to a lower level. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. Joseph, one of the other questions that came in was somebody else asked me a question on how do they get a demo.
Sure, write to us at info@projectargus.co. We will post that later in the chat or in can we post that info@projectargus.co. Just write to us, make an appointment with us. We'll be happy to swing by your office and let's do a test drive.
Okay, all right, that's great. So Mitch, in terms of the management of the whole system. So if a company already has a fleet management system, what's the sort of best advice for them?
Well, I mean, you can use them in parallel. Our system will not interfere with an existing system. There's no reason not to keep them both if you're happy with one. There are a lot of features that our solution does provide that might be comparable to what an existing tracking solution would have. We're going to provide, our MCC platform does provide geofences and tracking, driver management, some security features as well. So it would be worth talking to Joseph and Tony about the different features that are available through there. But there's no conflict running dual systems as well if they each have their own purpose.
Yeah. Okay. All right. It makes sense. So Joseph, so can we just summarize in terms of your overall experience of actually driving the vehicle with the intelligent speed assist?
It really takes away a lot of stress. Now we are limited at 50 zone. We are in a built-up area with a lot of houses on my left and right. What I really like about it, is non-intrusive. That means that when the moment that the system takes away that or limits your speed is not abrupt, you don't feel that it's something that's very sudden and that will create a problem in the course of your journey. We have also a bypass button that allows us to, in the event of an emergency, to allow us to bypass a limit for 10 seconds or 30 seconds to allow us to merge safely into traffic. It takes me back to my basics, giving the right distance, having the right distance from the vehicle in front of you, planning ahead. I actually feel that with the system installed, it actually takes away stress from driving. Because in Singapore it's really strict. Speeding is something that is often very looked at by the police force here. Thus, with this system, it really helps to reduce the amount of stress that I felt, using it and traveling on the roads on a day-to-day basis.
Actually, just look at as you said, one other question just popped up to me. And Mitch, maybe you can answer this as well. So the question was, has it actually led to a reduction in employees getting points or their licenses or speeding fines or even disqualification.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're not usually familiar or privy to previous records for the drivers of our customers, but I have not had any of our customers using our ISA technology let us know of any times that they have received a speeding ticket since implementing the technology. Yeah, it hasn't been brought to our attention. So
yeah, it's got to be another business advantage, right? You know, because there's nothing worse than having drivers who have points and things of that nature. I know, for instance, when I was working in a large logistics company, one of the things that was done was that the licenses were always checked before they employed drivers, because they didn't want to employ drivers who were, you know, potentially going to be, you know, disqualified and then not being able to drive a vehicle as such. So yeah, it's a good point. So look, we're coming up to the hour now, so I'm going to hand over to Janet shortly. But I really just want to, Mitch, you know, thank you for you know, presenting today. Joseph, if you thank your driver and obviously you for the crew, you've done a great job, you know, showing us what you know, the actual live scenario, which anyone can do. Is that correct, Joseph? Anyone can do this. They can do this from their own transportation office, or, you know, however they monitor. So Mitch, any final points that you want to mention?
Well, I think just that last point you were talking about, I think is one key bit of feedback that we have been getting is a lot of, you know, the drivers that drive their work vehicles and experience safe speed, it's corrected their behavior that transitions back to their own personal vehicle. You know, they just don't try to speed anymore because they don't feel the need to. So I think it just makes them better drivers all around.
Yeah, it has a calming effect, right?
Yep,
and I'm you know, look, you know, again, based on my experience, I can imagine because it has that calming effect, it actually reduces the, you know, the opportunity for road rage, things of that nature as well. Okay, well, listen, look, thank you very much, everybody. Now, let me hand you back to Janet for the closing.
Thank you, Tony. So thank you all for joining the webinar on helping Vision Zero cities to prevent harm. We hope that you enjoy the webinar and the questions and answers session. If you have any questions or feedback, please feel free to contact Project Argus at info@projectargus.co. We look forward to seeing you at the next webinar session. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Thank you.